named the Chief Operating Officer of Art Happening Limited. The next speaker on the agenda would be Yu Chen, a student who has studied under the guidance of Professor Xiao Wei Lin. Chen is the executive officer of Mu Yun Cultural Co. And the numerous efforts and projects conducted by Mu Yun Cultural Co. really echoes the theme of today's seminar, which is heritage action and Taiwan practice, as well as passing down to the next generation. And Ken will talk about using cultural heritage education to preserve the printing industry here in Taiwan. I would also like to welcome Professor Lin, Wenling Lin. She holds a PhD degree in museology, namely museum studies, from Leicester University, UK. She now teaches at the Arts Management and Cultural Policy Department at the National Taiwan University of Arts. I would also like to welcome Huang, Miss Xiaowen Huang, a project manager at Art Happening Limited. I understand that Huang just graduated from the Art Management and Cultural Policy graduate school at the National Taiwan University of Arts under the guidance of Professor Lin. She is now working in the field of cultural heritage preservation and promotion. Huang will talk about the development and preservation of Hsinchu's glass industry. And I will also invite Yan-Po San, a new addition to today's edition, who will talk about the preservation actions at the Western Keelung port. So he asked to speak today. So yesterday we finally were able to approve his application, and he will speak for about 5 minutes today. Nonetheless, he will still be joining us today. So please, my apologies for the slight change of the agenda today. One of the presenters, Professor Xiao Wei Lin, unfortunately is not going to be able to join us today due to a previous engagement. She has asked me to share some of her ideas regarding industrial cultural routes and their developments here in Taiwan on her behalf. I myself will also talk briefly about the development of industrial heritage reuse projects at Kaohsiung Port. Joining us today are also two prestigious international speakers. Christopher Waters will be joining us today. And fortunately, I believe it was at a conference or a workshop called Preserving Legacy, co-organized by ICOMOS and the National Geographic. I met him, and he is now works at the Museum of Antigua and Barbuda, and he is now at the University of Western Indies Five Islands Campus Director and Adjunct Faculty. I would like to extend my warmest welcome to him. I would also like to welcome Wanhua Go. He and I go back a very long way. I believe it was in 2023 at the ECOMAS conference. That's when we met for the very first time. At that conference, there was a side meeting featuring Taiwanese cultural heritage, and afterwards he became an ANIH correspondent, and he also visited Taiwan himself. So what a tremendous honor to have these two esteemed international speakers also joining us today. So this concludes my introduction to today's presenters. Without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Professor Liu from the Fo-Guang University for him to make his presentation.
Okay, so Professor Liu, you're online. Could you turn on your mic? Okay. Yes, we can hear you, Professor Liu. Are you going to share your slides? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to hand the mic over to our first speaker, Professor Liu. I'm very honored to be part of this seminar. I'm going to share with you my studies on the Taiping Mountain Forest Railway. I started this study in 2024. Last year marked the 100th year establishment of the Forest Railway. Now, a lot of the railway are no longer in action. Around 1978, 79, because of typhoon, the whole railway was seriously damaged. The logging industry, lumbering industry in Taiping Mountain has also no longer exists. So the Taipingshan Forest Railway has ceased for quite a long time. There was also the highway. So there was a period of dormancy. And later on, there was a lot of efforts to transform the Taipingshan Forest Railway. And then in the recent 6 years, we have been seeing a lot of new proposals from both the central and the local governments. There are new proposals emerging around the Taiping Mountain Forest Railway, aiming to revitalize the local economy as well as tourism. There has been ongoing studies. There have also been a lot of efforts to revitalize the local economy. Later on, the review showed that it's going to be too costly. It's going to cost over $1 billion NT dollars. There's not enough of resources to invest in the forest railway. So overall, the whole planning for Taipingshan Forest Railway has been held pending. And then earlier this year, there has been some new ideas talking about the regeneration of the Taipingshan Forest Railway. So today, I'm going to share with you some of my observation. So far, the railway, a lot of the infrastructure no longer is in function, but are there any areas for revival, for new transformations? And this is what I'm going to share with you. So this is the background of the Taiping Mountain Forest Railway. Here, these are the major forestry and also logging stations in Taiping Mountain. The railway was not completed until later. As you can see here, the timber ground developed in 1915, and then later on, the railway was formally operating in 1924. There were funds devoted to the building of the Taipingshan Forest Railway. And through that railway, they're able to carry the logs to the major stations and cities around Taiping Mountain. So Taiping Mountain is one of the 3 largest logging stations in Taiwan. It is one of the largest. The 2 other ones are Bashan Mountain and Ali Mountain. And out of the 3 logging stations, Taiping Forest provides the largest number of timber to the industry at that time. So here on the bottom right, the photo, this was the train that carried logs while passing a wooden bridge. This is the entire railway map. Here there are a few main sections, the plain section, and then in the center, the mountain section. So the plain section, there are like trains that carry all the timber. That's the plain section. The plain section is composed of 3 segments. At that time, the Japanese governor's office, they did not have that much money, so they had to build the railway in segments. The orange segment is the railway in collaboration with the sugar refinery of that time during the Japanese period. And they use the train that carries sugarcane for lumber. And then the other segment Again, the Japanese government at that time did not have sufficient funding, and they didn't have the talent. At that time, they were building a nearby hydraulic station. So then this segment of the railway was built by the Taiwan Electrical Industry Company. So this is the yellow part. This is the yellow part, built both for lumber and also both for hydraulic energy. And then on the right-hand side, you see a very short segment in blue. This is financially supported by the local Luodong Township citizens. The head of the Luodong town, he raised funds among the citizens of Luodong, and with that funding, they built this blue segment. So during those time, lumbering industry was very lucrative, and the head of the township was able to persuade the citizens to donate and to contribute to the building of this railway. So this is the plain section of the Taipingshan Mountain Railway, and at that time, it was very important for the economy. And then for the mountain section, it's more complicated. There are two kinds of trains. First, there are these light rail cars, light rail cars. And then for certain mountainous area where it's a big slope, they will use the cable ware, the cable carts. So the mountain section includes two different systems, the cableways and the forestry light railways. Your time is up, Professor Lee. So could you make a quick summary? We apologize that we only have 8 minutes each. And here some highlights. Here at the Taipingshan National Forest Recreation Area or Recreation Park, there are these accommodation, there are these forest railway heritage. There's also a Bongbong train, Bongbong train, the yellow train you see. And also there's the Luodong Forestry Culture Park. Here in this culture park, we can learn about the history of the Taiping Mountain and the timber industry. There are old dormitories and also warehouses. This is the final station, so you can see these infrastructure, and they are all preserved at the Luodong Forestry Culture Park. There are also two stations that are preserved well. The first is Dazhou Station. This station was rehabilitated, and now it has transformed into a restaurant. It also has these historical exhibitions. The station also serves as a center for cultural activities. This is the other station, Tiansongpi, that is preserved very well. It is the only station along the railway that is listed as a historic building. And now, if you go there, you will see that there are these playgrounds. There are also these shops that sell creative cultural goods. There are also some cultural and arts exhibition. And then this is Tuchang Station. Tuchang Station was newly built. It referred to its original building. So here you can see the original trains exhibited here at Tuchang Station. But again, Tuchang Station is newly built. Architects referred to the original blueprints, and then they built this Tuchang Station. It's not in use now, but you can go there and you can see the trains. I'm sorry, Professor Lee. Can you make a summary? Because we all have your slides, so could you just give us a summary? So for a lot of these revitalization efforts, there's cultural tourism. There's also these repurposing of the railway stations. There are recreational activities that are taking place. There's also these venues and galleries focusing on the history of the Forest Railway and also on the surrounding environment. And these are the examples that I would like to share with you, our efforts about restoring the Forest Railway. Thank you.
遇到满脸危机，但是我们已经顺利化解了。
Thank you. We apologize for the time limitations. Now, can we invite Natasha Long, please? We will start sharing your slides. Could you all hear me? I will make my presentation brief. Hi, my name is Natasha Law. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Art Happening Limited. We specialize in designing and installing permanent exhibitions, especially relating to cultural heritage. I studied in Edinburgh. I have always had a strong interest in historic sites and cultural heritage, historic objects. And among these, the industrial heritage is my favorite. I would like to share with you our project at the Pingtung Tobacco Factory, how we were able to turn the site, the decommissioned tobacco processing plant, into the 1936 tobacco culture hub. This is a brief introduction to myself. We specialize in the transformation and regeneration and adaptive reuse of industrial heritage. Our aim is to turn the abandoned buildings, the artifacts, into not just a medium for exhibition, but also to invoke collective memory and to continue the legacy and passing down the true value of these assets. So what we specialize in is to integrate contemporary artistic language and visual storytelling to deepen the dialogue between preserved sites and objects and space. Through this sort of thematic transformation and contextual reconstruction, we aim to create exhibitions that are intellectually grounded, accessible, and culturally resonant. We try to combine different elements, such as the employees that used to work there, the images, the technologies, the techniques that lie at the center of our preservation efforts. And this is a photo that shows you the current, the appearance of our exhibition hall. This hall houses the greatest number of the tobacco leaf processing machinery. So this hall, in addition to other different buildings, have become a very important cultural and creative activity and exhibition and performance space at the heart of the Pingtung city. The Pingtung Tobacco Factory was established in 1936 as one of the biggest tobacco processing sites in southern Taiwan. It played a very important role in not just assisted the local tobacco farmers in perfecting their farming skills. And we are also talking about its relationships with the local farmers, enhancing the soil quality, fertilization, harvest of the leaves being sent to the factory, and then they are processed to be turned into marketable products. So this tobacco factory is a hub of the education and communication with the local farmers. It really played an important role in elevating the local agricultural and farming practices, as well as an important role in Taiwan's exports. However, it was decommissioned in 2002, but it was quickly followed by years of preservation advocacy. Reopened in 2022 as the 1937 tobacco cultural base, it has shifted from a factory space to a narrative, a memory space. So we believe industrial heritage is not just about preserving objects, but transforming them into spaces of memory and cultural value, the imagination, the collective memory, the preservation of the people's spirit of people who used to work there, and the manufacturing techniques were all part of our preservation targets. So here are some of the techniques we have employed to in the designing process of the exhibition space. For example, we know that there is the cutting, the destemming, and the drying and the smoking, the processing of the tobacco leaves. So we wanted to present all the different steps and make meaningful connections among them to educate people about how tobacco leaves were processed in the past. We also wanted to highlight the key roles played by the workers, particularly female laborers. And so in our text, in our wall panels, we hope to capture the hardship and hard work of these workers and present them in a coherent narrative. And thirdly, we hope to really highlight the context of the exhibition. We don't just want to have a single top-down authoritative voice dictating the narrative. Instead, we want to tell the story from different perspectives, particularly involving oral narratives. So here are the three axes of our curation. Visible displays refer to the original machinery and architecture. Invisible experiences include scent, sounds, and light installations. And we also included oral histories that allowed workers to become real narrators. Here we show you the different focuses, if you will, of how we believe that industrial heritage is a platform for local cultural governance. It's a collaborative process of involving all the different stakeholders. So exactly how do we do it? Like first, the visible machinery display, it is not just a static display. We attach stories, personal perspectives to the interpretation panel. Now you can see this is a vacuuming and the stand removing machine. And we also were supplementing the display with the storytellers, namely the employees, the factory workers' perspective. Here we show you how we design the visitor route so that there is more of a bodily embodiment. There's an incorporation of scents, of lights, of the ambient, of the smell. So we were able to create this immersive experience where visitors could imagine themselves as a tobacco leaf. They go from the funnel into the machinery and throughout the production line, and they hear the machines being turned on. They hear the water jets washing, cleaning, rinsing off the dust on the leaves. They hear the machine heating the leaves. They feel the heating of the room, and they could observe and really feel with their five senses the different steps of the tobacco leaf processing process. So for the invisible aspect of the tobacco factory, it is even more meaningful to have to give them more thoughts. Tobacco factories have all been shut down here in Taiwan, and the skills related to tobacco leaf processing have been forgotten. Therefore, how do we revitalize this tradition by making it a part of the contemporary memory? How do we, through cultural imagination, to connect the tobacco techniques with the local community's collective memory? So through narratives combined with the oral history, combined with pictures and images, combined with the workers' first-person narratives, we were able to bring the memories to life. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. Now let's turn it over to the next presenter.
交给你了。
I'll hand the mic over to our third speaker. So, greetings to all of you. I am Jingwen, and I would like to share with all of you my study on the Taipei Railway Workshop. So my topic, for whom is industrial heritage preserved? The reason I raise this question is that when industrial heritage is repurposed, it's exhibited, who are the target audience? What are the values or messages that we are conveying? This is a brief introduction of myself. I'm also very grateful to the moderator for already introducing me. So my research background, Taipei Railway Workshop, this is the first and also the largest modern railway repair factory in Taiwan's history. You can trace it back even to 1895, and then during the Japanese time, it was designated National Historic. There was some physical deficit. There was also a lot of land development. So Taiwan Railway Company at that time started to prepare to relocate the railway workshop. And the remaining workshop, the remaining Taipei workshop, is what we see. It has a very full-scale infrastructure. It's also a very important venue that reflects the memories of that time. And that is why it is a very important case when we talk about industrial heritage preservation here in Taiwan. There were the context of urban planning. There were also a lot of different discussions from different fields. So as mentioned, in 2016, the railway workshop was relocated. There were a lot of discussions. Some wanted to preserve it as a historic building. Some wanted to turn it into a commercial or residential area. And then inside the railway workshop, there is a bathroom, a historical bathroom, and so that was preserved. And then later on, a lot of the city councilors, a lot of the grassroots groups, they campaigned to preserve the entire Taipei Railway Workshop. In 2013, 2014, that was a very important time point. At that time, the government organized these railway festivals. There were on-site art creations, there were a lot of exhibitions, there were also a lot of guided tours. So all those events fostered this movement from bottom up. The entire movement, they highlighted the controversies behind the Taipei Railway Workshop. On the opening day of the art festival, it was also the first day of the review committee, the Urban Planning Review Committee. During that committee, they were reviewing the historical status of the railway workshop. The decision was to designate it as a National Historic Site, and that took place in 2015. So now the site is going under preparation as the National Railway Museum. So I'm going to share with you a number of my research questions from preservation to exhibition. I would also like to cite Mr. Tony Bennett's exhibitions as extensions of knowledge and power, knowledge for the public, allowing citizens to internalize a lot of these memories and knowledge. And we look at the entire movement. Indeed, we can see this exhibitionary complex. Here, I'm also citing symbolic and functional legitimacy discussions from Turnbridge and Ashworth. And finally, from New Museology, emphasizing public participation and the reinterpretation of heritage. So here, from state narrative to public negotiation, we have seen the transformations of space in the Taipei Railway Workshop. We see these different turning points. We also see shifts in exhibition strategy, as mentioned, from technological pride and focus to historical memory to education to public participation, and also from national narrative to social negotiation. So this is my talk. Thank you for listening.
看来是击出了三沙打，所以瞬间就
Thank you, Junwen.
Thank you for your presentation.
就是在那一场
I believe we first met at the public hearing, and time has quickly gone by. It's good to see you again. Now I want to invite Yo Yu Chen from Mu Yun Cultural Co. I have prepared a brief presentation, so no worries. I will finish right on time. Can you all see my slides? Good afternoon, everyone. I am the CEO of Mu Yun Culture. Our company is headquartered in the Wanhua area in Taipei, dedicated to the preservation and promotion of cultural heritage. I want to briefly talk about how we have been preserving the printing industry through cultural heritage education. Here is an outline of my presentation today. I want to talk about, I will skip the Dublin principles and the principles put forward by UNESCO and TICCIH and the definition of the true value of industrial heritage. And the reason why I have decided to choose Wanhua as the topic of my presentation, it is really because it is the earliest developed area in Taipei City, dating back to the Qing Dynasty because of its proximity to the river. Its development began during the Qing Dynasty and extending into the Japanese occupation. The Japanese government merged and consolidated the Taiwan New News and Taiwan Daily News and renamed it the Taiwanese News, which became Taiwan's dominant newspaper at the time. Because of this new development in the early Japanese occupation era, this created a wealth and of valuable historical and cultural records. And the location of the news agency was in the Wanhua district. This is one of the factors influencing the formation of the printing industry and other related businesses in this district. Now let's have a look at how the development of railway transportation and Wanhua station, train station, later helped to drive the development of other industries in the Wanhua area. For example, the printing industry, clothing wholesale, watches making, glass crafts, for example, the Golden Yihexin Cultural Preservation Project actually had its inception in this era. And this area was also well known for its wood processing businesses. These all came into being because of the earlier development of the printing industry and the later development of the railway transportation, including the railway station. Newspaper agencies located in the Wanhua district back at the time have been listed in this table: Taiwan Daily News, Self-Reliance Evening News, New Taiwan Daily News, National Evening News, China Times, Industry and Commerce Times. In fact, China Times, Industry and Commerce Times are still headquartered in their original buildings to this day. And the booming movable type printing industry gave rise to other related businesses, from the upstream supply chain to the downstream businesses, from the ink industry, ink and paper machinery, to advertising, to mounting and paper, to the downstream transportation and logistics, bookstores and stationery retail stores. Business was booming. An ancient proverb that has been passed down goes like this: marrying a printer and you will be well taken care of, you will be well fed. And here is a chronological timeline of the development of the movable type printing industry in Wanhua, dating back to the late Qing to early Japanese period. The government began to promote education, so teaching materials were in high demand in the 30s. And because Wanhua is a district of the greater Taipei area, had the advantage of being a transportation hub. It became Taipei's printing hub. And in its heydays, there is Wanhua had approximately 300 to 400 printing factories gathered in the area. During our field research, whether it's the typesetting, whether it's the book binding, whether it's the newspaper publication printing, and in its heyday, this place was home to up to 400 printing factories. However, in the mid-80s, movable type printing began to decline. It is because of the advancements in printing technology and stricter environmental regulations. Also, the relocation of newspaper production lines to overseas locations, the industry began to decline. And today, there is less than 10 printing companies left that focus on small quantity wet invitation printing. And a fire broke out at this printing workshop earlier today, or earlier this year. So it ruined its movable letterpress machine. And this is yet another example showing you the decline and the disappearance of the handmade printing industry. Let's talk about how the efforts we've been making to preserve the culture here. The local communities, with our assistance, we offer training to train young docents to give guided tours about the historic block. We also put on exhibitions, and we also organized the movable type printing hands-on experience workshop for dynamic preservation. Here I would like to show you a short video clip of our hands-on experience workshop. It's actually very time-consuming. It's quite tiring.
我们也是请了老师傅回来继续下去。
As you could see, we invited the skilled worker, the craftsman, to come to our workshop as our workshop facilitators. Of course, we have compiled different artifacts and documents. This is an aspect of our text and image-based preservation efforts. And of course, we also organized board games and learning resource boxes that are aligned with our existing exhibitions that really help people to learn about hands-on printing. We created these toolboxes that allow users to experience traditional letterpress printing from the comfort of their homes. And we also work with the university students to design real-life escape room game as part of their graduation project. So the university students conducted a lot of field research, interviewing factory owners. They also use that as an inspiration for their mystery games. And some of them created escape room props boxes. And these are not for sale. This is part of their graduation project. I experienced it myself. It was really fun. And here, we also tried to digitize the font. We collaborated with a well-known Taiwanese font company to pull resources together to transform the handcrafted details of traditional lead type into a digital typeface suitable for contemporary layout and design. We also worked with the local restaurants to offer these special font types for them to create flyers, for them to use in their menu design, just to name a few. There are naturally many different challenges. We do attract tourists. However, visitors are mostly families and children or middle-aged or older customers with fewer young people. And the majority of the experience is still quite static, more display-based. Experiences need to be more aligned with the time and the space, and they need to be more dynamic. There are not enough digital records. Currently, there is a lack of open source materials or digital images records available for the further preservation and promotion. And there is generally a lack of long-term plans, a few cases of cross-disciplinary collaboration in technology and education. With that, I conclude my presentation. Now I would like to invite Wenlin Lin to give her presentation.
好，主持人各位。
Greetings to all of you. I am Lin Wenling. I'm a professor at the Graduate School of Arts Management and Cultural Policy in the National Taiwan University of Arts. So within a very short time, I'm going to share with you my study, some of my research findings. Next slide. So the background context of my study. A lot of us in Taiwan, we are familiar with Jingguashi, the mining industry in Jingguashi. It has over 100 years of history. It started as a gold town back in the 19th century. There were gold and copper mines discovered. And then in the Japanese time, there were 50 years of very active mining and extraction activities. And then in 1987, all the mining activities concluded. So we see a 100-year history of Dingguashi. Over the years, there have been a lot of efforts in revitalizing these heritage. So the new Taipei city government at that time, they established the Gold Museum. It's a public museum focusing on the ecology. It's not just about the history, but there's a cluster of museums. And the museum is very tied to the lives of the local people. From 2004 till now, it's already 2 decades. It has gone through different phases of development. So here, initially, the museum aimed to preserve, revitalize, and also bring people's attention to the value of the mining history. And now it's more about stimulating, revitalizing local developments. So my topic today focuses on this art festival, Mine Arts Festival, that started back in 2020. It is composed of all these landscape installations. They surround the land around the museum. So here you can see different landscape art and also how they are showcased in the environment. So my research question, I wanted to explore how the Gold Museum leverages these art festivals as a strategy to regenerate, to revitalize, or repurpose the industrial heritage. What are some opportunities and challenges? This is my theoretical framework. I look at the regeneration of industrial heritage. This is quite of a global trend, but we also see how cultural industries are closely tied to economic development or economic revitalization, placemaking. And I try to apply a broader framework looking at this topic. So here, citing Perry et al., festivals can serve as an integrative site. It brings together tangible, intangible heritage. It brings together the mediation of space and place. It also allows the reinterpretation of broader cultural issues. It's also a venue for us to reflect on the role and value of cultural heritage in contemporary society. So this is the framework that I have developed. I think it's a very suitable tool or instrument to help me look at industrial heritage from a broader perspective. And my findings, here, these are my three main findings. First of all, the restating of the narrative of mining history through these art festivals. For the Gold Museum, it takes a very rigorous and also formal narrative to talk about the mining history. But from the art festivals, there are different perspectives applied. There's also like fiber art, textile art, and also sound art that provides all these different ways of understanding, narrating the mining history. Like on the right-hand side, this photo is one of these sound artists trying to collect the sounds of the local residents. And these are the different narratives developed around the mining history. My second finding, art festivals as a strategy, allowing opportunities of co-creation with residents. A lot of the art installations are outcomes of co-creation with local residents. Artistic interventions and these local co-creations strengthen the ties between the museum and the local community. This is a very important task for the museum. And through these art festivals, they can really foster a sense of social cohesion. And my third finding, art festivals, it's a strategy. It's a strategy for adaptive reuse of space. From these art festivals, we see the interplay between festivals and heritage. We also see how the mining sites are temporarily transformed. And these temporary transformations spark the curiosity of the visitors. On the right-hand side, used to be a place where the residents do laundry, but now through this artistic intervention, it sparks the curiosity of the visitors. So in conclusion, festivals in the Gold Museum has created a platform for residents, for participants to engage with the museum. The festival also serves as a branding activity, as a branding occasion to attract tourism. As for challenges, next slide, please. Here for challenges, my studies have observed a limited resident participation. A lot of the participants are the same group of people. And also nationwide, we see a lot of these landscape art. There's a phenomenon of festivalization, and that might undermine the potential of cultural-oriented tourism. So my conclusion, my study highlights these different aspects of art festivals as a strategy for regenerating industrial heritage. These art festivals are smart, small scale, publicly organized, so the economic development impact is limited. On the other hand, my study also points out that we should focus on ways to encourage broader participation. This is also one of the ongoing challenges facing the art festival. This concludes my talk. Thank you.
那我们接下来就请我们的
Thank you very much, Professor Lin. Now, we would like to turn it over to Xiaowen Huang, the project manager at Art Happening Limited. Dear moderator, my name is Xiaowen Huang. I'm pleased to be here today. And I would like to thank moderator for his warm introduction. I majored in outsourced and commissioned management of cultural assets and historic sites back in graduate school. After receiving a master's degree from the Graduate School of Arts Management and Cultural Policy in Taiwan, I began working for the Art Happening company, I would like to foreground our discussion today, which is the glass industry in Hsinchu City. Many people believe that inception of the glass industry in Hsinchu began in 1925, when the first glass factory was established. So today, here we are in 2025. This indicates that the industry has had a long history of over 1 century. And during the Japanese colonial period, Hsinchu, thanks to its abundant silica sand and natural gas resources, was seen as an ideal location for developing the glass industry. And back at the time, all these different resources were being used for military operations, for medical supplies, and things like that, particularly when Taiwan was under the Japanese occupation. This has also been during the 1930s and 40s, the industry really took off. And in 1954, the Hsinchu Glass Manufacturing Company Limited was established as the largest glass factory in Taiwan. In 1960, this factory created a craft division. This was an one of its kind breakthrough at the time, because originally the Hsinchu Glass Manufacturing Co. was only focused on everyday wear, very utilitarian houseware. However, with these craft divisions establishment, it marked the start of glass art in Taiwan, leading to diverse glass-making techniques and products. Now, when you think of Hsinchu, you think of its semiconductor industry as well as its science park. These were the major government projects that the government began in the 80s. So with the establishment of the science park in Hsinchu, the traditional glass craftsmanship and industry gradually declined. Back in its heyday, every family had someone working for the glass industry. However, since the 80s and onward, many of these factories were relocated to China, and many of these factories had to transform or upgrade to make, for example, optic electric products for the high-tech industry. In 1991, the government designated glass craftsmanship as a cultural feature of Hsinchu, prompting subsequent preservation efforts. Back at the time, there was not any idea, or there was not enough understanding of recognizing craftsmanship as intangible heritage. However, back in 2009, the glass craftsmanship was finally and officially recognized as an important intangible heritage of Hsinchu by the government. Here is a timeline showing you the heritage formation and the publicitation of the glass industry and its craftsmanship. In fact, there has been a Golden Glass Award held by the government since 1993. This award was established to recognize outstanding craftsmen and has become an important annual prize to encourage glass artisans. And in the following the establishment of the award, in 1994, the Glassmen's Society, namely the Glassmaker Society Hsinchu, was established to unite artisans to promote local glass craft. It is strongly supported by the city, fostering innovation and hosting exhibitions. And the next step, taking place in 1995, was the establishment of the biannual Hsinchu Glass Art Festival. Its original idea was to promote tourism, and it was originally a small event organized by the government. However, with its evolution over the years, it has become a public-private large-scale collaboration project. It in 2022, it featured a design-focused exhibition in collaboration with private firms, introducing glass-making craftsmanship to wider audiences. In fact, the government also set up a glass museum of Hsinchu City in 1999. It was once a VIP guest house used by the government, especially during the Japanese colonial period. It was then transformed into the Glass Museum in 1999 for preserving and promoting glass craftsmanship through exhibitions and activities. Now, I would like to highlight that this is a democratic development, can be seen as a democratic improvement or development of the glass industry. Now we really need to think hard and long about when the public sector's funds begin to run dry. What will happen with all these activities and cultural institutions dedicated to preserving the glass art? So how do we find ways through public and civic participation to ensure the sustainable development of these preservation projects so that they can become an integral part of the citizens' everyday life and collective memory? And my presentation today have introduced our preservation, the city's preservation efforts, public-private collaboration over the years. If you're interested to find out more, please follow our live-streamed presentation during the TICCIH 2025 conference later this month. Now we would like to move on to Yanpo, Mr. Yanpo-san. We would like to invite Yanpo-san to be the next speaker. I would like to commend all the presenters for their tremendous, great time control, and giving us more time to squeeze in extra speakers. So, Mr. Sun, over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will talk about the legacies of the port of Western Keelung. This is an abstract of my presentation. You have all received it, so I will not bore you with more details. This is the location of the Keelung port, the western side of the Keelung port, to be more specific, as a preservation project site. Due to government urban regeneration policies over the past, the residents of the settlements on the western coast of Keelung Port have begun to emphasize their native cultural heritage. There have been massive demolition of settlements, and dating back 2 decades ago, this was the location that attracted many settlers from outside of town when industries here were still booming. However, due to the decline of the local industries, there had been brain drain, a reduction in population. So now let's zoom in at the different neighborhoods that are called the Pingtung district, located on the eastern coast of the Keelung port. Here, highlighted in yellow, are the 5 different neighborhoods. You could also see that as the port expanded, the residential spaces were reduced. Many residential buildings were torn down when the Keelung port was expanding at one point. So there were many stories of people witnessing the rise and the fall of the port, people's houses being demolished and relocated because of the port expansion projects. There are many untold stories. Here, I show you the changes in the coastline of the port dating back to the early Japanese colonial period. As you could see, there have been reclamation projects in 1930s. You could see that from the 1904 to 1945 and all the way to 1980, there have been tremendous changes of the coastline due to land reclamation and port expansion projects over the years. Next page, please. Next slide, please. Here, I show you this area on an old map. Back in 1812, you could see that on the western coast of Keelung Port, settlements were already formed. And this area had been inhabited at least before this map was drawn in the 17th year of the Jiaqing era, 1812. And according to historic records from the Dr. Mackay, who came to Taiwan, from his early diary entries, he referred to this area being a very busy settlement area. And in the report on fish stock published by the Taiwan's Government General Office during the Japanese colonial period, it was noted that the fishing village had already appeared in this area on the left side of the harbor, 1 mile from Keelung Street. This area, as you could see, went through different periods of modernization. In the Meiji 31st year, during the Japanese occupation period, the governor of Taipei County, Murakami, in response to the widespread outbreak of the infectious diseases from other parts of Taiwan, designated this area as a quarantine base. Now, let's have another look at this area from another angle. The Dabai village can be seen from this aerial photo. Many of these houses were built along the hills. And before the Japanese period, this area was only inhabited along the coast. However, as population began to grow, all these settlements began to appear. And in fact, a coastal fortification was constructed by the Japanese Army's fortification unit back in the 1900s. Now, this is another historical photo showing you that back in the Japanese colonial period, the village or the settlements only existed along the coast. There were no settlements on the hills. Now, this has changed. You could see how in different stages back in 1930s all the way to 1988, different periods of workers' dormitory buildings were added, and because of the limited land area along the coastline, these were mainly built either on the hills or on top of the mountains. As the neighborhoods and the local settlements began to expand, so did the port. So a lot of these houses would have to be demolished and relocated to make way for the port expansion project. You could see that now the current population only stands at 1,188. And back at the Japanese occupation period, the population was 1,200. In its heyday, the population grew to 10,000, but now today it's only 1/10 of its peak area. You could see that the population has been declining over the years because of the decline of Keelung Port. And many local industries also disappeared with the decline of the port. So the local community leaders began to engage in various efforts to regenerate the local communities. And the re-establishment of the Baiminwen Fourth Visitor Center really marked an important turning point. We've been working with the local communities, convincing them that it is the future of this place lies in their able hands. Since 2022, the community's attitude shifted from designation as a historic sites would disrupt our lives too. There are two historic sites just in one community. They were able to feel a sense of pride and honor today. Establishing a visitor service center really facilitated the communication with the community, enabling the community to understand the benefits of cultural assets, the benefits of preservation projects. By highlighting the characteristics of each community, the historical and cultural translation of this area ultimately formed a cultural route throughout the port. As you can see, the local communities established a cultural pathway or cultural visitation routes for tourists. Here are some pamphlets and maps to show you what they've been able to create. We were also able to set out these nice exhibition centers, areas throughout the different villages, and they're all connected by the visitors route. I would like to end my presentation here due to time limitations. Um, so this is a local grocery shop. It's a very, very important gathering place for the local communities. Now, it faces the possibility of being demolished by the local government because the owner had just passed away. So my organization and I quickly intervened. This is a place of the local memory. This is where people gather, despite the fact that it is just a mom and pop shop. If this place is no longer in existence, there would be the disappearance of the last trace of the old settlement. So this is our most recent initiative. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
但是中场可能出现观众进来闹场，
So, you have 1 minute extra. Thank you for joining us. Professor Xiaowei couldn't be with us today. So in the following, I'm going to present on behalf of Professor Lin's presentation. So here, Professor Lin, she probably many of you are familiar with her work starting from 2021 till now under the support of the Ministry of Culture, the Bureau of Cultural Heritage. She and her team has developed and finished this program titled The Cultural Pathways in Taiwan. It is a very important program focusing on these different cultural pathways. It's a publication that is already available. If any of you are interested, please do take a copy. So here, let's look at the website. So some of you probably know already, some of you not. But here I would like to update you that we have this cultural path website. We welcome all of you to take a look at this website, the cultural roots of Taiwan, the different cultural roots. And here on the website, you can understand the context. We can see a lot of materials related to industrial heritage. There are important mining, sugar industry, water, forestry. These are the 4 main cultural routes. There are also intangible cultural assets like literature related cultural routes. So these are the highlights of the website. You can see a very clear framework. This is also a very important material that Professor Lin would be sharing during the TICCIH Congress. Some of you are probably very familiar with the idea or ERIG in Europe. They have the ERIG industrial route here in Taiwan under a similar framework and context. We are putting into practice the concept of cultural routes here in Taiwan. Here on the website, you can see how we differ from international practices. There are also these very interesting local context. These are the hard works of Professor Lin and her team over the years. And many of us, we are also very involved in these works. We talked about the tobacco factory, or we talked about the Wanhua district in Taipei City. We know the cultural routes are not limited to these 5 highlighted routes. This is really just a starting point. Youyu, founder Youyu, you also shared with us your case, and also the glass industry or the art festivals and the gold museum. These are all the different cultural route networks that we are building. And this is really the hope and the goal of Professor Lin to come together with our efforts so that we can all contribute to raising greater awareness, and so that we are not just limited to Taiwan, but also like in the TICCIH Congress, we get to highlight our local action in this global forum. So for our international audience, here you can Google like Taiwan Cultural Route and you can find the website. We can also share the address, the site through the ANIH platform. It's now the website mainly in Chinese, but there are also a lot of materials accessible to our international participants. We also seek your suggestions and advice. So here you can see this entire website. It's like a journey shared by Professor Lin. Cultural Routes of Taiwan. Here I can only present on behalf of her. I cannot go into too many details, but I sincerely welcome all of you to follow us, and also on the TICCIH Congress, and also through the ANIH platform, and also through multimedia assets. Later on, we're going to share with you more outcomes from the Cultural Routes website. So I probably have how many minutes left? I probably have some time left. I will I'm going to share with you my presentation, and I'm also going to summarize what I've heard during the 7 talks.
我就放这些就好了。
So this will be my main slide. It's rather straightforward. So for all the different cases that we have studied, we're all on a journey advancing to the future. But where are we trying to head to? What are our goals? What are our objectives? And for cultural heritage preservation, are we advancing towards our goal, or are we only holding this vision, but it's more like an imagination. So I'm sharing with you this case study of Kaohsiung Port. Here, the main topic is KW2. This is the Kaohsiung warehouse number 2. It's only one of the cases. Maybe next slide, please. So this is the location of Kaohsiung Port. This is KW2, the warehouse. And then the next slide. So here, on the bottom left corner, you can see the location of KW2, the Kaohsiung Port Warehouse number 2. So you can see the entire area of Kaohsiung Port, and this is the second most historical building in the Kaohsiung Port. It's also a very successful revitalization case. There's still a lot of warehouses in the Kaohsiung Port, and the Kaohsiung Port Company, they have this development model. The Kaohsiung Port Land Development Company, they use KW2 as a model, and then they're trying to open up more warehouses, applying the model, also gradually revitalizing the entire Kaohsiung Port area. One of the key messages here is that not every warehouse in the Kaohsiung Port is a historical cultural heritage. Yet, the Kaohsiung Land Development Company, they have preserved all the warehouses. And from these works, They try to evoke this sense of future, but also a very visionary. There's also very mindful of romanticizing the history. So through these visual architectural design, spatial design, they are sharing these stories, these history. They invoke all the different senses of the visitors. Here, with limited time, I would like to take this time. Can all of you see my main screen? So I'm going to stop sharing, but I have this map here. It might be hard to see visually, but here, what I'm trying to share is listening to all these 7 presentations. I've heard a few concepts. First of all, culture, heritage, preservation, and tourism. Looking at Kaohsiung Court and Taiping Mountain Railway, we've touched upon this issue, and also public participation, the gas history, the Keelung Port. A lot of you talked about public participation, cultural governance as well, and also the National Railway Museum. This is probably the first bottom-up museum, and also the Wanhua case and the tangible cultural assets. And then for the Pingtung tobacco factory and also the gold museum, we have learned about the artistic interventions, the spatial interventions that fostered the development of these various venues. So these are the key points that I have heard. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next part of our program. We're going to invite 2 international speakers to conduct their sharing. The first, Christopher Waters. There are a lot of great sharing. We've already communicated with the 2 speakers. They will be sharing their practices. They will also be offering feedbacks. So should we start from Chris? So Chris, we're going to hand the mic over to Chris.
Hi. So good morning from me,
大家
which
好。
is good afternoon to you. So my name is Dr. Christopher Waters. I split my time between the Museum of Antigua and Barbuda and the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus. And I've been working most recently on this concept of replacing, and in particular, replacing colonial industrial heritage within a Caribbean context. How do we think about community and defining colonial industrial spaces in heritage tourism? And I'm seeing a lot of really interesting potential parallels between the stuff we're doing within the Caribbean region and within the presentations from Taiwan we just heard about. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to introduce real quick where Antigua and Barbuda is, in case you've never heard of it. It's so small you can't see it on this ocean on this map. Next slide. As a matter of fact, it is so small that the capital star for St. John's, the capital of Antigua and Barbuda, is larger than the actual island itself. It's 281 square kilometers. We have a resident population of about 100,000 people sitting in the Eastern Caribbean, which is between South America and North America. And as a former British colony, independence was achieved in 1981, but it's got a 6,000-year human settlement history prior to that. Next slide, please. So prior to my current work, I was the heritage manager for the National Parks Authority, which was also the sole managing authority over the Antigua Naval Dockyard and related archaeological sites, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which you can see here from 2 different angles. It's a 18th and early 19th century dockyard used by the British Royal Navy to protect the Eastern Caribbean, to protect and refit their ships. Now, what's become really interesting in terms of industrial heritage is that it's been completely converted over to, in part, a heritage tourism site. There's a museum that we get visitors, tourists coming through to go visit the site. But the primary income and the primary draw is actually its conversion from a dockyard that used to repair Royal Navy frigates and warships into a space to work on, protect, and engage with the modern yachting community. So taking the maritime industries and skills that are available through the long history of the space and repurposing them for the contemporary era. And this is not just conversion into modern fiberglass and plastics and HVAC systems, but also traditional skills in sail making and varnishing and woodworking, all of which are part of the community legacy of the dockyard itself. And the local community that still exists, the descendants of the original enslaved African workers that worked in this space. They were still in the community, are still sailors, still work on these boats and continue on. So in terms of practice, it's an incredibly, I think, important example within industrial heritage, and something that I will get to in my commentary as well, of trying to figure out ways in which to apply past practices and adapt them to contemporary systems and contemporary needs, so that even though the practice might have shifted because the tools have shifted or the industry shifted, that connection, that place connection remains, so that you still keep these communities involved and you still keep the people who have long familial ties back into these spaces. Next slide, please. We also have a sugar industry. The Caribbean islands were settled by Europeans in the 17th century and 18th century, primarily because they could grow sugarcane. So there's a long industrial history of sugar. These are 18th century windmills. We had a 19th century and 20th century industry culminating in, at least at the time, Antigua and was the island, supposedly, with the longest highest density of narrow gauge railway in the world per square kilometer. At least that's what we've been told. We don't know if that's true or not, but it's a good story. But in 1981, at independence, there was a political movement that basically said that Antiguans and Barbudans will never be slaves to the land again. And this sugar industry was, in one fell swoop, shut down. The factories abandoned, the railway systems all ripped up. But if you look to other islands, such as Barbados and St. Kitts, they managed to keep their sugar industries going, although not necessarily as largely successful economic opportunities. But what it meant is a lot of their industrial infrastructure related to the sugar industry is still intact, and they still have the trains running back in those. So if we go to the next slide, we've got the next big thing, since there were so many presentations on trains. Next slide, please. There we go. I have to show a locomotive as well. So a lot of the tangible, movable aspects have been collected and are shown at the Museum of Antigua and Barbuda, even though much of the sugar landscape itself has been lost. So what the big issue, or what I've been thinking about and what we've been working in the teams with this heritage within Antigua and Barbuda and the wider Caribbean region, though, is also thinking about how do we grapple with, engage with the past, which Antigua and Barbuda were part of the British Empire. African chattel slavery was legal until 1834 in the entire British Empire. More than 90% of the population is of African descent, so descendants from the enslaved Africans that worked the plantations. Hundreds of thousands, millions were kidnapped and brought across to the Western Hemisphere. Hundreds of thousands were died along the way. Millions more died in abject horror and misery in order to ensure that the British Industrial Revolution could get started. So the wealth that was generated from these small islands started the industrial revolutions in Europe. And so what we have is a lot of colonial heritage and legacy and infrastructure, in particular the industrial components that have a lot of bitterness and a lot of anger from the domestic population. They're not interested per se in protecting a lot of these sites because they are edifices to oppression and to colonial overlordship. On the other hand, we have a lot of tourists, in particular, coming from Great Britain, Europe, North America, who come to these places, in particular the dockyard, and see themselves in those spaces. Like they are visiting their own heritage. They've gone abroad in order to see something that is part of their history and the valorization of their past. And it's created a disconnect to where there's often this kind of a disconnect between the people and the local communities and these sites. And so when we're going through the talks that we just heard, I thought they were incredibly well presented, and I commend all the speakers and the organizers for putting this together because it's engendering some very important conversations. But one of the things that I want to encourage or to think about, and something that I didn't hear within the plans or within the presentations, is trying to figure out how to bring these cultural heritage spaces and turn them into places. So especially the 20th century industrial heritage, which most of what we're talking about was from the 20th century. From what it sounds like is there's difficulty in getting communities to engage with these places, and that the different sites, in particular, looking at the tobacco factory and the Taipei railroad workshop and the gold mines, they're trying to find very creative ways in which to bring the communities into these museum spaces and to bring visitors into these spaces in order to engage more with what is, in order to protect and valorize these cultural heritage elements. But what I was wondering was, are there ways in which these sites are engaging with the communities in order to maintain some of these traditions and some of these practices, or at least evolve them so that we're creating new industry, we're creating new sustainable livelihoods and sustainable occupations within these that valorize, that protect the cultural heritage sites themselves, while also maintaining, while also allowing for people to grow and to evolve and to change. And I think this is one of the complicated parts of cultural heritage, is how do we evolve in the elements that we want to hold static? And that comes back down to, again, placemaking. How do we take trends where the population is shrinking, where the population is leaving, where there's a generational difference, where the people who are engaging in these elements are stopping or dying out, and these traditions that are being recorded. How do we bridge the gap between those elements, and how do we create a new space? I was really intrigued by the art festival at the gold mines as well, as one of these interesting ways of taking that landscape and changing it, and then taking what it was an extractive industry and turning it more into a regenerative project. So the other, I think, aspect, which is, I think, underlying all of these projects and underlying heritage in general, is making the local global, and some of the pitfalls that we fall into when we're trying to do that. So how do we bring visitors in? Because we want to share our products, we want to share our culture, we want to share our elements, but we don't want to dilute it. We don't want to change it. We don't want to necessarily have it changed by the world. So I'm going to encourage and ask the speakers to think about how you are creating these spaces and engaging with these spaces, but also trying to ensure that you're not losing that local touch, keeping that community centric opportunity, creating those places and recreating places, or in many ways, replacing some of the narratives that have become dominant, and then working back with your communities in order to ensure that your communities that you're trying to protect and engage with and you're working with and that want to protect themselves still maintain their place in the world. So I think my time is more or less up, so I'm going to pass that on to pass the microphone back. Thank you very much.
好，非常感谢 Chris 他的分享。那因为我们想说，先让2位国外学者先一起分享完，然后我们在后面进行综合讨论。那我们现在请旺在线上吗？旺 OK 吗？可以请他开始。好，那就请旺直接开始，谢谢。
Okay. Can I get my slide up? Okay. Ida, can you get my slide up?
Okay. 好，请稍等。
Okay. Yep, that's the one. Okay. All right. Good evening from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for inviting me here. Just a quick introduction of our company and what we do. So we are here based in Sydney. We've done work mostly in Australia and some work in Saudi Arabia as well. So we have been involved in a number of industrial heritage projects as well. And this is the one that I'll be sharing next. Can I get the next slide? Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Okay, there you go. Okay, so this area is called Wash Bay. As you can see, it is pretty iconic in terms of location, next to the Sydney Harbour Bridge, located next to the city. Oh, sorry. Before you go to the next one, can you stay to the next slide, the slide before? Can you just go back? Sorry. Can you reverse back? Okay, great. I just want to do a quick historical summary. So as you can see, located in the Sydney Harbour, this is where the British first, arrived, the first fleet back in 1788, and this is where Sydney, if you see behind the bridge next to the Opera House, that's where the fleet first landed in Australia back in 1788, and throughout this time, from then until the mid 1800s, it was mostly fortification and maritime, and after that, in the early 1900s, there was a plague that basically wiped out this whole area within the harbor, and the government basically took over the entire area as a result of that. And what the government did was basically construct or enhance or upgrade the wharf area here, as you can see on the left and the middle and the right. So the early ones started out from the left corner, Pier 1, and then you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9. 8, 9 is the one on the most right. So these wharfs were basically designed and constructed based on the time at that period where maritime the maritime industry was booming, especially in this part of the world. And these wharfs were designed, were pretty high tech at that period. So, double-story wharfs where, a ship can dock and basically get loaded pretty quick. So during this period from 1900s to 1922, this was a pretty high-tech period for the wharfing industry, maritime. But during post-World War II, as we all know, things, shipping, especially with air travel and so forth, shipping became a bit more redundant, and then the wharfs essentially lost its use, especially during the 1970s, where you got the containers, the big shipping containers happening. So these wharfs were no longer viable, especially, as I think one of the presenters spoke about the port up the north part of Taiwan. That's essentially basically what happened. Same here. So basically, this whole precinct was neglected for about 20 years from the 1980s. And being in such a prominent area of the harbor, the government obviously took a pretty big role to revitalize this. Can I get the next slide, please? So we were basically involved since around 1990s to basically assist to the conservation or adaptive reuse of the piers in this area. So the first one that started was 6, 7, and 8, 9, which was the more prominent ones. We worked on basically influencing the design and converting the wharf into a apartment, residential / commercial as well. So 6, 7, as you can see on the right corner, that's the apartments, the residential apartments, and on the left, the top left, that's the commercial office. Can I get the next slide? Okay. And then at the same time, within the precinct, we wanted to introduce also different types of residential as well. So the top left there, you can see that's the townhouse that we've worked on, basically introducing not just introducing contemporary living as well. So you can see on the bottom right, that's one of the apartments on the top. And the bottom left, that's archaeology. Obviously, being such a old precinct, there were a lot of archaeological remains. And I'll show you in the next slide what we did with that one. Next slide, please. Yep. So this is one of the museum and exhibition that we worked on, and basically to provide interpretation and education and so forth to the community. This was one sort of below a basement of one of the apartments, but accessible by the public. And this is what we were working on to basically provide one part of it. I think this is the last slide. But generally, what with this one is, with this whole precinct, it started out with residential and commercial. And recently, we completed the last phase of the project, which is the arts precinct. So we just finalized the arts precinct area last year. So with this whole precinct, what we've learned is that you need to have a mixture of use in order to be sustainable. You got residential, you got commercial, but you also have the public art and so forth. So you get people from outside the community and the precinct to get involved with the area. So I think sustainability is the most important bit, because without ongoing use of the heritage buildings and so forth, then heritage wouldn't be conserved. Typically, that's the problem. I think that's my last slide. Is that right, Ida? Can you just? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So that was a quick one, just of a project that I worked on. Patrick, am I supposed to talk about the commentator now, or is that the next phase?
是的。
Okay, so next one, is it? Okay, all right. Yeah, so in terms of comments, I really like the tobacco factory one. I thought including digital art and so forth was very interesting. I always find that typically when you sort of discuss topics about, say, even tobacco or defense and etc. or wars, it's a difficult narrative to basically to include community. But I think in this part, especially when the community was involved to provide the narrative of what the use of the building is, I thought that was very good. I especially like the interpretation of a tobacco leaf experience, how the tobacco leaf basically went through that process of, and you being able to experience the sound, you know, smell, heat, and so forth. That's actually very creative, that one. What I was very curious throughout all this presentation was, you know, who funded the projects, for example, whether it was government, private, and so forth, because typically to understand that use or who is funding it is important to know, because I think a lot of times with heritage projects, depending on what the use is, the funding, whether it's from private or government, is important to know. There was, I think, Speaker 3 spoke about the Taipei railway shop. I really like the question about for whom, because these days, I think the problem with, well, it's not a problem. The issue is also where heritage is often misguided or thought of as just, you know, museum for display. And I think that, you know, without engagement, you know, community engagement and ongoing use, the heritage display or museums are often not preserved. So I like that that part actually was considered true. The printing industry, that was very interesting because I was in Wanhua, I think 2 years ago. And I actually very liked that briefing in Taipei. The fact that it's still preserved, number one. Unfortunately, I did not have the chance to see the printing industry section. But I really like that innovation about how they integrated, you know, creative things like even the printing toolbox and so forth, and getting the local restaurants and so forth, you know, to integrate the font types into their menus and, you know, day-to-day sort of use. So what I think the key thing for me from that was, you know, that consistent engagement with the community, because at the end of the day, without consistent engagement with community, you don't get that ongoing preservation. People will forget. I think the speaker about Keelung Port, that was very interesting how the fact that the Fort Visitor Center really was the turning point, because I thought that, you know, a lot of times community see heritage, or generally some communities see heritage as a disruption to their life, and this from a private heritage practitioner, a lot of times you hear people going, oh, you know, heritage is troublesome, blah, you know, there's too much regulations, so forth. But I think part of our role is not only to preserve heritage, but also to empower the community to recognize and feel proud of the cultural heritage identity. So I think what the work that has been done in Keelung Port, for example, the education, empowering the community, that's very, very good, because I think at the end of the day, if the community understands that heritage is not just about their cultural heritage identity, but it also enhances the community, and also not just the community there itself, but also the wider province as well. That's my comments, Patrick. Thank you so much.
好，非常谢谢这个分享啊。那我觉得先短暂的，如果大家各位讲者可以稍微消化一下，然后我先做一个小结。那如果待会开放给时间说，如果每位的讲者对于国外评论员的一些回馈有一些
presenters to respond to these comments, if you'd like, please feel free to raise your hand. So I'll do a quick summary. So Christopher's topic I really agree with this question, this reflection. Replacing colonial industrial heritage, reflecting upon colonial industrial heritage, both tangible and intangible. And what is really fascinating here is that there's actually, I really hope that we can foster dialogues among the different sugar refinery sugar industries across different colonies. And this is going to be a fascinating conversation. A lot of the colonies, the former colonies that have had very vibrant sugar making industries, it's going to be an interesting entry point for dialogues. And once sharing is also fascinating. In the port area, it's one's focus. And today, a lot of the talks today, you also talked about ports, like the forest, the timber from Taipingshan Forest Railway eventually goes to a seaport. And then all the railways eventually, they are connected to major ports in Keelung Port, Kaohsiung Port, and also cultural routes that connect railway and the ports. It's really vital. Ports is an important point for entry and for exit. And this is where we're trying to achieve today. We're trying to bring these best practices from abroad, like a port, right? We're bringing in these knowledge and practices. And then in Taiwan, we're also trying to export our local practices. So this is just a really quick reflection and summary of what I've heard. Now I'd like to open up the floor. Our presenters today, would you like to respond to each other, or would you like to respond to our international speakers? Feel free to just raise your hand. Okay, Professor Liu, I see your hand. So here I have a question for Juan. You talked about the port area in Sydney and also the historical buildings, the repurposing of the buildings, and I'm very curious about the content. Some of them are commercial offices or residential apartments. For these new functions that are introduced in these historical buildings, who decides the purposes, the new functions? You talked about communities. Do communities take part in the discussions of different ways to repurpose the buildings? Or is it more like a one-sided decision made by the government or developer?
Thanks for the question. I think at the beginning, especially back in the 90s, when this whole first started, the government's intent, this was a joint government and developer project. At that point, the phase one, stage one, the government wanted to revitalize this whole area. So this whole area was quite derelict. There was nobody living here, nobody coming here to work. It was empty. So the government wanted to revitalize, and obviously the developer wants to make money. So the first stage was to basically bring economy back into the area. So residential and commercial was the first stage. That was the first thing that happened. Stage two was having a hotel and also an arts precinct. In the different part of the precinct. And the arts precinct, that's where we have the community coming in. So there's a theater, there's a dance school, there's a music school. So that was stage two. So that's what we just finished recently in the last 5 years.
那我们请OK 吗？
Did I see another hand? Wenling. So my question goes to Christopher. You mentioned community engagement, community participation. And also, you have expertise in running a museum. So I'm very curious, as a director of a museum, as a manager in a museum, when you try to engage the local communities, what are some challenges that you have faced?
Thank you for the question. I mean, there's many, many challenges. Part of those challenges are decades and generations of distrust of governmental or of authority. So when I was working with the national park, it was seen as was one of the few local government entities that was present, and therefore everything from the state of the roads, the state of the electricity system, the state of the water pipes to the cost of imported strawberries was blamed on the national parks. But basically the problem was, and so you become the face of regulation, you become the face of enforcement. So a lot of that, the challenge there is just developing long-term ties, right? As heritage professionals, we're not in it for the short term. We're not in it for a couple of years, the length of a project, but this is ongoing community development and work and building trust. And that takes time, and that takes engagement, and that takes being open and available. But that also takes taking the stories, and I want to again commend and echo the comments made about the Tobacco Museum and getting people involved in crafting the narratives and the stories, because if you can create buy-in, if you can create people who think that people who want to protect the heritage more, you end up creating a much stronger institution, a much stronger sense of place, in a way that if you just create a museum from the top down and you kind of impose a story, or you have this centralized idea of what's going on, I think that ends up creating drift from the community, where they don't feel attached, they don't feel connected to, and therefore they don't care. And so when someone comes along and plops a big bag of money and says, I want to redevelop this into some resort or hotel or in factory or something like that, there's not a lot of public outcry or backlash against protecting some of these places. So you end up losing a lot more. So it's important to especially hire and train community members, so there's a part of this, part of the management decisions, part of the curation decisions, part of the interpretation decisions, not just through workshops and community events, but actually building capacity within the communities and recognizing that the capacity is already there. It just needs to be fostered and engaged with. So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge is always making sure that and then doing it every day, day in and day out, and not letting up. That becomes some of the biggest challenges that we faced.
谢谢谢谢，我觉得收获很多。
好，谢谢Grace 跟这个文林老师。那因为目前还有没有发表者有一些询问或是想再补充各位的报告的？那如果大家没有，因为我们现在可能我们就利用一点时间，就是现在这里大家可能要想一下，那请大家把镜头打开，因为我们要做一个合照，一个合影，就是来记录一下我们这一次感谢各位在这样的一个出国前，相信各位都很忙，所以在这个时间，然后特别拨冗来到现场。那我们主办单位这边好，那谁会 Q？ 会有人发言3、2、1吗？对，你们等一下由那个工作人员听他们的指示发言3、2、1好了。对，好，再麻烦工作人员。
老师，那我们现在要截图合照，谢谢大家。1, 2, 3. Okay, and again. 1, 2, 3. Thumbs up. Everyone, thumbs up. Thank you. 大家可以比个赞，谢谢。Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thanks.
可以分享那个主画面，就是那个 啊，你用好，我就一边讲。谢谢，还是如果大家还没有问题，我这边再补充一些啦。就是总结一下，整个我觉得也许各位不知道对各位有没有帮助，但是我觉得刚好是最近今年我有接触到的一个讯息当然也很感谢文化部文资局的这个协助。就如果大家上 ANI 的平台有一个最近1月公告的一个叫做在日本办的一个研讨会，他有会后发布了一个，就是日本的富冈狮子厂也是世界遗产登录世界遗产10周年，他们办了研讨会，然后在会后发了一个叫做群马宣言工业遗产的群马宣言，提出文化生态系这个概念。那我是觉得还蛮受用的，就如果大家有在这个小薇老师跟纯熙老师的这个编审下，我在 ANI 平台是可以看到，阿尼平台是可以看。
This publication in both Chinese and English on the website of ANI. It talks about cultural ecosystem. So through today's talk, we understand that from cultural heritage, from arts, and also from the energy of the locals, and also about commercial business, these different factors that are in tension. These are all critical matters that should be put in the hands of the citizens. And then we support each citizen in its daily ecosystem when they're able to exert their power. We're going to really strengthen public participation. It's going to be a daily practice for many. And I think this is one of the ultimate goal. We don't have to advocate for the preservation of cultural heritage, but together we are incorporating these concepts in our daily practice. And I think this is quite a key idea that echoes with today's talks from different parts of Taiwan. We've gone through different sites in different parts of Taiwan. We're also very grateful to Chris and also to Wen. Thank you for joining us despite of the time difference. We're all gathered here together. I also hope in the future we get to work together. I look forward to seeing many of you, working with you in Sweden. And we can really showcase our heritage action, our practices in Taiwan. Looking ahead, the Bureau of Cultural Heritage will continue its efforts. We also look forward to working with our friends from the global community. We also have a survey for you to fill in, a post-event survey. So for many of you, if you're still online with us, please take a few minutes to complete the online survey for us. Through your feedbacks, we can further organize these events. We can also better connect with our friends from around the world under the guidance of the Ministry of Culture. We can continue to make ties and also to voice our ideas. So time is up. This concludes our seminar today. Any last comments or questions? If not, here as the moderator, I'd like to thank all of you for your participation. I also hope we can keep in touch. Once again, special thanks to our international speakers, Christopher and Juan, for joining us. Thank you all for your participation.
Bye bye.